The sun rises over a sprawling plain, where shadows of human figures stretch long upon the earth, yet among them one silhouette bears features that whisper of rarity and wonder. In a world untouched by written record, our ancestors moved with purpose, unaware that some among them carried the unmistakable signs of what we now call Down syndrome. This story is woven from fragments of bone, echoes of ritual, and the keen eyes of modern science, inviting us to reconsider the very fabric of prehistoric life. The skull, slightly flattened at the back, the hands small and delicate, the long bones, revealing a gentle, broad structure. Today's forensic experts recognize traits unmistakable to those versed in chromosomal divergence. In that moment, we touched a human life whose genetic tapestry matched that of millions born across the globe today. Medical knowledge as we know it was absent, yet humans intuitively noticed differences. Perhaps the elders saw the child's gentle demeanor and strong social gaze as a gift, not a curse. Evidence of careful care healed fractures, no signs of neglect hints at compassion rather than fear in the face of difference. Within one such burial mound, excavators found a small individual laid to rest with pottery vessels and shell ornaments. Analysis of dental arches and limb proportions suggests again the presence of trisomy 21, a genetic echo bridging continents and ear. Imagine the wind-whipped cliffs of Ice Age Europe, where a child's remains were discovered curled gently in a shallow grave. Yet the bones tell another tale. Wider spacing between the first and second toes, a slightly shorter femur, and a skull-nose index that speak to what today we view as diagnostic markers for Down syndrome. Instead, we uncover a constant thread of human variation, woven into the story of every generation. Even in the absence of clinical diagnosis, prehistoric peoples recognized difference and found ways to include, to honor, to mourn, and to celebrate. Among these voices, the gentle laughter of a person with Down syndrome would have found a place, perhaps as a bearer of good fortune, laughter rippling through the circle like warm sunlight. These signs, faint but persistent, anchor this ancient soul firmly within our line of inquiry. Tiny fragments of genetic material, preserved against the odds, reveal the unmistakable extra copy of chromosome 21. They danced in firelight, they stoked cooking embers, they sang lullabies to newborns, and heard the echoes of their own laughter. Laboratories in Europe have now sequenced partial genomes from remains dating back 3,000 years, shining light on how widespread this condition truly was. In some cultures, unusual traits were seen as signatures of the gods at work. The Norse myth of the crippled god Hodra, limping yet fierce, may hint at reverence for difference that resonates across time. Every bone, every artifact, every tracing of DNA adds color to a mosaic that spans continents and millennia. It tells us that compassion is not nobilitas ancestral. We infer care from healed injuries. We imagine social roles from grave goods. But we can feel confident that human societies long ago held space for those who walked differently, just as ours does today. Healed fractures, intentional burials, and offerings of food and pottery suggest these individuals were cherished and protected, not cast aside. Archaeologists gently brush sable hairbrushes across millennia-old soil, uncovering a burial thought to belong to an honored member of the tribe. Their stories remind us that differences always belong to the human family, and that every life, regardless of chromosome count, carries value beyond measure. It's easy to imagine how prehistoric communities might have reacted. Could this tribute honor a member of the community with Down syndrome? In every era, humans have found ways to weave care and community into the tapestry of life, and so we press onward, honoring discoveries yet to come, certain that the next brushstroke will enrich our understanding evermore. The art reveals no mockery, only reverence. Here, the ancient Egyptians may have recognized and celebrated the unique spirits among them. What other surprises await beneath the soil? Our journey has only just begun. We leap now to the banks of the Nile, where a limestone statue depicts a figure sitting serenely, shoulders broad and eyes gazing forward with a depth of empathy. Across the vast expanse of what we now call North America, mound-building societies left behind frameworks of earth and stone. Each new discovery evaporates the false belief that disability is purely a modern experience. Consider the power of community rituals. Around a flickering fire, kin and neighbors gathered to share tales of creation, of ancestors who walked upright from the mist. Recent advances in DNA extraction from ancient teeth have helped confirm suspicions. Yet for all our modern methods, we must tread with humility. The bones speak, but they speak in riddles. The deep past beckons us to embrace a continuity. That the joy, the struggle, the spirit of people with Down syndrome have always been part of the human story. And if they carried an extra chromosome, did that bring them closer to the divine? As we piece together these fragments, we stand on the shoulders of both ancient ancestors and modern Perhaps the greatest surprise is not the presence of Down syndrome in the ancient world, but the unmistakable evidence of care. Today, as we advocate for inclusion and respect, we draw strength from those who came before. The final bone fragments lie silent beneath layers of earth, yet their testimony whispers across ages. The echoes from prehistory beckon us forward, urging us to dig deeper, to question further, and to embrace the full spectrum of human existence. What secrets lie dormant beneath the roots of ancient forests or the stones of forgotten caves? Each excavation brings us closer not just to understanding the people of the past. One particular burial stood out not for its wealth, but for its gentleness. The skeleton, belonging to a young child with a flattened nasal bridge and shortened limbs, was wrapped in animal skins and buried beside a carved wooden toy. But to seeing them as mirrors of ourselves, complete with empathy, complexity, and care for those who lived outside the margins of norm. Among the silent fields of Neolithic Europe, archaeologists uncovered a site where a small community buried their dead beneath earthen barrows. No signs of trauma, no indications of haste, only the patient echo of hands that carried, fed, and watched over this child as one of their own. Analyses suggested the child lived for at least 5 years, a significant span for someone with health challenges in a world without medicine. Clay tablets speak of omens and rituals, but in certain burial pits, bodies with distinct cranial differences have been found beside amulets and beads. Some scientists speculate these were individuals seen as spiritually unique, and shortened limbs features modern observers recognize as potential indicators of Down syndrome. These carvings don't mock, they elevate. Often they are depicted holding ceremonial objects or seated in positions of calm. Among them, one skeleton bore cranial features suggestive of neurodevelopmental difference. Some experts now argue this individual may have had a genetic condition akin to Down syndrome. In societies where symbolism ruled the sacred, a chisel stroke was a declaration. These figures meant something. They were reminders of balance between the seen and unseen, the known and the mystical. Disease, famine, and conflict loomed large. Yet within that harshness, the fingerprints of love remain. Soft, subtle, stubborn, with one figure always portrayed with gentle, rounded features and a shorter frame. Was this a child with Down syndrome immortalized in clay, or a symbolic guardian? Either way, they were part of the mythos. And perhaps, just perhaps, they were modeled on real individuals who lived among these people, that their presence was interpreted not as lack, but as connection to the divine. It has always been here, quietly walking beside the march of progress, shaping families, communities, and hearts with its own rhythm. In a world where most names faded with the wind, to have one's likeness carved in stone or shaped in clay suggests deep emotional resonance. These figures weren't ignored, they were honored. Their presence served a purpose far beyond mere survival. In a time when every anomaly was a sign from the gods, those with gentle eyes and unique patterns of speech may have been storytellers or seers. Yet this person lived to adolescence. A burial near the Danube revealed the skeleton of a teenager, interred with a hand-carved musical instrument and a necklace made of river pearls. Music, after all, has always been the domain of those with heightened emotional intelligence, and many individuals with Down syndrome today show remarkable musical sensibilities. Even without today's labels or institutions, ancient societies may have known something we've forgotten in our obsession with efficiencies at value ISNT measured in output. But in presence, it would not be surprising if their gifts were cherished even then. The bones, once again, show a familiar story. Shortened stature, mild scoliosis, and cranial morphology consistent with Down syndrome. That survival alone speaks volumes about love and protection. For centuries, modern historians assumed harshness was the default of the ancient world, that difference meant death. But these burials, rich with personal objects and careful positioning, challenged that narrative. No indicators of exclusion. This child ate, slept, and died among kin. Their life wasn't an exception, it was part of the rhythm of the tribe. As though nature whispered even then, humanity thrives not in uniformity, but in variation. They offer a profound truth, that empathy existed long before language could name it. We must remember, prehistoric societies lived under the constant weight of survival. Every hand was valuable, yet again and again, we find graves of those who may not have contributed in traditional ways, but were nonetheless given dignity in death. They weren't abandoned, they were honored. This changes everything. In northern Spain, inside the darkness of the Cueva del remains of a Neanderthal family were discovered. The surrounding remains offer no sign of separation. Fast forward to early Mesopotamia, where civilization was just beginning to root itself in fertile crescents. Could it be that those with Down syndrome were not pitied, but revered? Even in Mesoamerican cultures, hints emerge. Carvings from Olmec civilization show figures with broad, flat noses, almond-shaped eyes. Such depictions are not acts. Let's return to Europe, this time to the Iron Age. Why a musical instrument? Could they have been a performer, a keeper of melodies passed down orally? Time and time again, we see it. Care, continuity, and a refusal to abandon those deemed different. We must be careful not to romanticize the past, of course. Many children, regardless of ability, died young. In southern China, tombs from the Han Dynasty reveal a different kind of story, artifacts depicting caretaking scenes. To be remembered is no small thing. We begin to understand that Down syndrome is not a modern phenomenon, it is an ancient inheritance. It didn't arrive with hospitals or The science supports this. Geneticists now agree that trisomy 21 has likely existed as long as Homo sapiens themselves. These individuals lived. They were fed, clothed, protected. Their stories, though partially lost, still glow faintly in the soil. We may not know their names, but we know their kind. We've seen their smiles across time. It's a non-disjunction event, a random slip in chromosome division, and like lightning in a storm, it's unpredictable, but ever-present, a natural part of our biology. What's extraordinary is not just the occurrence. Even today, many tribal societies approach neurodiversity with reverence rather than resistance. In certain parts of Papua New Guinea and the Amazon, children with cognitive or physical differences are seen as special spirits, a signal not of defect, but of depth. Those born with this condition may have been bridges between the physical and spiritual, the earthly and divine. It is a very old form of human expression, one that has been part of our story from the very first campfire. Their DNA runs in the veins of our ancestors. Their laughter once echoed through the first painted caves. The echoes of this mindset stretch back to the beginning of culture itself. They often meant elevation, a place at the center, not the edge. The grave goods, the careful burials, the healed injuries, these actions tell us what mattered. New bones rise from the dust, bringing with them old stories. And with everyone, we're reminded that humanity isn't defined by its sameness, but by its embrace of difference. The answer is clear. They were people like us, with hearts, with questions, with hope. What if a storyteller passed down oral epics, remembered not just for memory, but for emotional richness? The possibilities widen with each new revelation, of recognizing the full spectrum of human life not as deviation, but as design. The ancient world teaches us that to care is not weakness, it is wisdom. Another burial, perhaps another ancient life lived with trisomy, another testament to compassion buried not under time, but beneath modern assumptions. We peel away the layers of ignorance and rediscover a fundamental truth. Different has always existed and it has always belonged. These lives hidden in the soil, painted on walls, carved in stone speak to us with one message. We were always human. In every corner of the globe, from deserts to glazes, we await the next sign, the next name, the next child who lived, laughed, and mattered. As new technologies emerge, EA modeling, enhanced DNA retrieval, 3D bone mapping, we are poised to uncover more lives that were once invisible. What did they see that we have forgotten? The past is not dead, it is whispering, and we are only just beginning to listen. And Down syndrome is part of that tale. As old as fire, as sacred as memory, we find proof that humanity has always been capable of deep care, even in the harshest eras. Because if the ancient world made room for the gentle, the different, the vulnerable, then surely, with all our modern tools, we can do even more. And again, the evidence is clear. They chose inclusion over indifference. This invites a radical thought, that Down syndrome may have been a thread of sacredness in early human societies. It's about rewriting the narrative of who we weren't, in turn, discovering who we still are. These ancient lives demand we look inward, to ask, how do we define worth today? We might never know precisely how prehistoric people thought, but actions speak where words are lost. We stand now in a unique position, armed with technology and ancient insight. What do we do with this knowledge? For one, we shatter the myth of prehistoric cruelty. We replace it with a vision of ancient dignity. We begin to tell a truer, fuller human story, one that acknowledges imperfection and celebrates it, one that sees the value of every form of intelligence, every rhythm of communication. This is why archaeology matters. It's not just about broken pots and buried bones. They also remind us that Down syndrome is not a modern medical anomaly. So the next time we hear the term disability, let us remember, in the most ancient chapters of our species, such differences did not mean exile. And when we see those early graves, cradled in stone and wrapped in care, we must ask ourselves, what kind of people took such time? Our exploration is far from over. New digs begin every year. Who knows what lies beneath the next untouched valley? And as science advances, we may one day trace entire family lines carrying the same mutation, showing that not only did these individuals live, they reproduced, they loved, and they left behind legacies. What if, in some ancient tribe, a person with Down syndrome became a matriarch? We walk a winding road, paved by ancestors we barely know. But in the bones of those with gentle eyes and open hearts, we find ourselves. The story of Down syndrome in prehistoric times is not one of tragedy. It is one of survival, of resilience, of love older than language. And if that's true, then our future must be one of understanding. Even now, with all our advancements, we are relearning what ancient people seemed to know instinctively, that every life, regardless of chromosome count, contributes to the soul of the community. We've only begun to scratch the surface of what prehistoric remains can reveal, and with each one, we rewrite history just a little. The bones lie still, but their stories roar. This is the inheritance of humanity, a shared, complex, and beautifully imperfect story. The journey does not end here. New questions rise. What other conditions lived quietly among our ancestors? Every story holds a chapter too soft to shout, too subtle to dominate, but too important to ignore. The presence of Down syndrome in ancient times belongs to that quiet chapter, a thread of truth long overlooked, now beginning to shine through the cracks of stone and soil. Again and again, the earth yields signs of care, bones tended after injury, small graves arranged with tenderness, lives preserved not through strength, but through love. We imagine prehistoric life as savage, ruled by hunger and cold, but the record contradicts that. In the sacred caves of Shalvit, where painted animals race across stone, tiny handprints appear beside towering mammoth forms. One hand wider than average, with unique finger spacing, may have belonged to a child with Down syndrome, a fleeting touch preserved in ochre and time. At their side, a shell pendant and a clay sun disk, symbols of light, of cycles, of meaning beyond words. That child stood among artists and elders. They pressed their hand to stone and said without words, "I was here." Not a whisper of marginalization, but a mark of belonging. That touch remains, silent and radiant, like a candle behind glass. They weren't just kept alive, they were woven into community. Someone fed them, clothed them, stayed beside them through fevers and winters. The child who couldn't hunt may have sung stories that soothed elders. The adult who couldn't build may have watched children, offered laughter, brought peace. In survivalist times, that was no small choice. It was an act of love deeper than language. In Japanese Jomon sites, children with clear signs of disability were buried with tokens of status. In Ethiopia, a young boy with short arms and cranial irregularities was buried with carved bird symbols of soul flight. These weren't throwaways, they were soul-keepers. Shamans, visionaries, storytellers, those who perceived the world just slightly askew. In some cultures, this was not a defect, but a sign of proximity to the sacred. Could individuals with Down syndrome have walked that line? The gentle giants, the silent sages, the moon-touched children of legend, they may be echoes of real lives. Stories passed down from villagers that remembered, long after bones had faded. In a burial near the Jordan Valley, archaeologists found a child laid to rest in a stone circle, bones delicate, the facial shape hinting at trisomy 21. Their graves aren't poor or hidden, they're ceremonial. Someone mourned them, someone remembered. That's not just luck. That's sustained care over years, over seasons of harvest and hunger. Their survival is not a fluke, it's a message. From Bronze Age cemeteries to Iron Age tombs, we now have scientific proof. The condition is old. It's not a disease of the modern world, it's part of the human blueprint. In mythologies across time, we find references to those born differently. In Celtic lore, the Silver Child watched the stars and spoke rarely but wisely. In Inuit stories, the Ice Walker danced slowly, speaking to spirits in dreams. Not just tools and weapons, but toys, musical instruments, carved charms, symbols of childhood and humanity. Each new site rewrites our assumptions. Whoever this person was, they were protected through injury and old age. We are learning that the past was not silent, it sang. And in that song, voices of every kind rose together. Together, they point toward an enduring truth. Individuals with Down syndrome were not anomalies, they were family. They were cherished, carried when they couldn't walk, fed when they couldn't eat, loved long after they could offer usefulness. That we will speak their names, even if we do not yet know them. That we will see them not as relics of loss, but as proof of ancient love. All traits modern families recognize. In those with Down syndrome traits, our ancestors may have revered, not just tolerated. From the Andes to the Nile, signs repeat. Children with short limbs, buried with dolls, teens interred with flutes, adults resting with herbs and charms. Into the stories we choose to tell, and the ones we've long ignored. In highland Peru, remains of a teenager showed signs of Down syndrome, flattened facial bones, bone density issues. Yet the body was adorned in woven fabric, laid beside a gourd painted with spirals. One not based on competition but compassion, not on productivity but participation, waiting not to be discovered but to be remembered. Their community chose to honor, not discard. They carved dignity into farewell. What does this say about us, centuries later? That in our modern obsession with efficiency, we've forgotten the ancient value of presence. Spiritual roles often went to those seen as different. It's more than a possibility. Folktales may hold more truth than we've credited. We often frame disability as absence. But, in the ancient world, difference may have held presence, emotional insight, calmness, intuition. And consider this. In some sites, individuals with Down syndrome lived into their teens, 20s, even 30s. In southern France, a skeleton found in a cave showed signs of both trisomy 21 and healed fractures. That is the paradox we now confront. What we thought of as primitive societies may have embodied a deeper form of community. Isotope testing and genetic sequencing have confirmed trisomy 21 in several ancient remains, and perhaps always has been. Science now converges with story. Modern museums are beginning to take note. Exhibits on early human life now include sections on neurodiversity and ancient care. Archaeology is no longer just the study of structure, but of soul. So what? Now, we keep digging into the ground. Yes, but also into our assumptions, into our language, because somewhere, in a yet unopened grave, lies another small skeleton, perhaps cradled in furs, perhaps surrounded by flowers. Let this be our promise, that we will not forget them, and in seeing them clearly, perhaps we will learn to see ourselves better.